The hell are you supposed to be?
Hello there, I'm Fintusius, and today we'll be reviewing the state of the Enhancement Shaman in Shadowlands. If you were let down by the spec in the recent years and you are still waiting for the announced 8.1 Shaman rework that never came, buckle up because it finally arrived.
Greetings, brother Shaman.
After being a bit deceived in Battle for Azeroth due to a rework promise that was never fulfilled, Enhancement received a big overhaul. Whether you'll call it a rework or a revert is something you'll decide on your own, but one thing is certain. Now's the time to put to use this piano lessons you took ages ago that were supposed to impress your future date that never happened in the end, as you'll now have a lot more buttons to press.
Let's see what abilities they gave me this time.
Good news, everyone!
After having lived a life of mixed but mostly negative feelings since its Legion introduction, Maelstrom as your resource bar has been removed. As a result of that change, Rockbiter, Flametongue and Frostbrand have also been removed in order to make way for something new, which is going to be a new core mechanic. Behold, your new Enhancement Shaman.
Chain Lightning, always good. Wind Fury, looks like I got all the good stuff.
You are now going to use a mix of different spells and ability cooldowns while managing your Maelstrom weapon stacks in order to make spells instant cast. Those stacks are gained through auto attacks, meaning the more Wind Fury procs you'll get, the more stacks you'll be able to obtain. In order to have an instant cast spell, you're going to need 5 of them, knowing they can stack up to 10, making it possible to accumulate 2 instant casts in a row. But Fintusius, what do I do now with all the stacks? Well, we can use them on basically anything that has a cast time except Hex, which is now by the way on a 20-second cooldown instead of 30, making it available to use on players right when the diminishing return timer expires. Here's the full list of affected spells which I'll cover in the respective sections, but you can pause the video if that's what you're after or just want to rewatch the amount of abilities lining up at the same time. Having said all of that, due to the removal of Maelstrom as a resource, everything that previously had a cost has either been removed or has a cooldown. Moving on, you now have access to 2 weapon buffs at the classic, but since there isn't any choice you can make here as they apply to your main hand and offhand automatically, you're just asked to click both Flametongue and Wind Fury weapon every hour so it keeps being active. This could have been easily baked passively but didn't, so let's call it flavorful. Level Lash now has a 12-second cooldown, while Crash Lightning is sitting at a higher than BFA 9 seconds but is now buffed by using Chain Lightning, which I will mention later. While Stormstrike's cooldown has been lowered to 7.5 seconds, the passive interaction it has with Stormbringer, which is also part of your mastery, has been changed to no longer grant a free cast of Stormstrike, but instead resets the cooldown of the ability while making your next Stormstrike deal more damage, which should lead to a more meaningful rotation. Don't get me wrong, Stormstrike is still powerful and remains a high priority spell to use, but your rotation will no longer look like you're just pressing that one button 24/7, as it also fixes the Feast of Famine type of gameplay where it feels bad if you don't get a proc, like in BFA. It should now be more a case of oh cool it procced instead of a oh man it didn't proc. Moving on, both Frostshock and Flameshock are making a return. They share a 6-second cooldown affected by haste and are going to be your new filler spells to use. But let me say that filler is only in their name, as there are quite a few tools to make them higher priority spells such as a conduit or talents just to name a few, so they are not just bland fillers. Now I hope I had at least your curiosity because now I'm about to get your attention. The next big thing making a return is your long forgotten raid spot, as Wind Fury Totem is back, and while it only buffs the party you're in by granting them a 20% chance for an extra melee swing, which isn't a negligible buff for any class or spec that directly benefits from auto attacks, as for example warriors will gain more rage overall due to increased amount of swings, or specs such as Red with auto war or demon hunters with demon blades. Lightning Shield is now a baseline ability which deals some splashback damage when attacked in melee, but most importantly also has a 50% chance to grant your Maelstrom weapon stack when hit in melee, making it a cool PvP buff. Your Feral Spirit now grants you 1 stack of Maelstrom weapon when used and an additional 5 over the next 15 seconds, making this cooldown a bit less bland. The elements also heard your call as Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning are now part of your baseline toolkit. Lightning Bolt is back to having cast time, meaning you will want to use it with your Maelstrom stacks, and the same can be said about Chain Lightning. However, it received a new functionality in the form of buffing the damage of your next Crash Lightning by 20% per target Thunderstruck, leading to a more interesting AoE rotation and shaman-like feeling. Being a hybrid is also back on the menu, as you can now support your party with the likes of Chain Heal and Healing Stream Totem, as they don't do a negligible amount of healing, so that's nice, as your defensive options haven't really been buffed outside of an increased baseline duration to Astral Shift to 12 seconds, but at least now you'll get to do some stronger off heals. Moving on to talents, there's a lot of new stuff, so let's start with the level 15 row. Lashing Flames increases the dot component of your flame shock on the target's shock. While it might seem minor, the damage of the dot itself is actually quite high, so this is quite a single target DPS increase. Forceful Winds no longer generates any Maelstrom. The damage bonus has also been nerfed to 50% per stack. Elemental Blast is here for enhancement, available as an instant cast through Maelstrom stacks, and buffs one of your secondary stat at random for 10 seconds on a 12-second cooldown. While it doesn't look super exciting on paper, allow me to do a pro gamer move and tell you that since it deals elemental damage, it actually synergizes well with the Shaman legendary that is available only for elemental shamans by design, as it might end up being very strong in the end for single target and could potentially lead to stacking mastery and making it your main Maelstrom stack spender depending on tuning. Storm Flurry is back for those that remember the Legion artifact trait, but whether it will surpass the other options will also be down to the build you'll be playing, because next up is Hot Hand. It has been reworked into a proc window for 8 seconds that reduces Levelash's cooldown and doubles its damage. It is triggered by auto attacks instead of the old RPPM, which means it'll get better the more gear or haste you'll have. What it does is that it creates a short burst window in your gameplay where you'll try to spam big Levelashes, but also has great synergy with the Levelash legendary effect you'll see later on, which could potentially be pretty strong for PvP. Lastly, on this row we have Ice Strike on a 15-second cooldown. It's another ability added into your rotation which resets the cooldown of your shocks when used. Shocks, however, have a short 6-second cooldown, so it would only make sense to take the talent if you were to try and spread a maximum amount of flame shocks in a niche scenario, for example with Fire Nova. And since I've just mentioned it, it is another new talent on a 50-second cooldown which makes all of your flame shocks debuffed enemies erupt with a fiery explosion but capped at only 6 targets. Since there is no easy way of quickly spreading flame shocks in AoE, do not expect this Fire Nova to be as glorious as the one during the Warlords of Draenor days, especially since it competes with 2 other great talents, which are notably Elemental Assault, which is just a very strong straightforward talent that grants quite a bit of single target DPS and legendary synergy, but also some flexibility due to added Maelstrom generation, so it's surely going to be an easy pick if you don't want to work on your rotation too much. Next to that is Hailstorm, which makes magic flow into your AoE rotation, as it smooths out your AoE gameplay by quite a bit by allowing you to never have a global that isn't doing AoE damage. What I mean by that is that thanks to this talent, you can now do combos by starting with Crash Lightning into an AoE Storm Strike, into an AoE Levelash, into an AoE Chain Lightning, into an AoE Frost Shock. It feels very fluid to play around in dungeon cleave scenarios, and that is just the base rotation. Next up we have Stormkeeper. Yeah, that Stormkeeper channel that so far only made your elemental brothers look all cool, but now you can be even cooler as thanks to Maelstrom stacks that channel becomes instant, which leads to quite the stormy gameplay in the form of Stormkeeper into double Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt. While this is an excellent tool for being a bit more mid-range, which should definitely work in PvP scenarios, whether it's going to be the go-to choice for PvE will be mostly down to tuning, as you'll still have to use your Maelstrom weapon stacks for it to make sense to use, while your competitor on that same row, Sundering, doesn't make you sacrifice all the resources and can just be used at will on a 40-second cooldown. Lastly, we have Ascendance. While it is still on the GCD, instead of removing it, Blizzard decided to compensate its usage by adding an uncapped big AoE hit to targets within 8 yards of you when you activate your Ascended form. Since the BFA Soul Strike spam gameplay is no more, can't really say if it's going to be that powerful of a choice. While Elemental Spirits is on that same row and hasn't been changed, the baseline Feral Spirit did by adding the passive Maelstrom stack generation. We'll have to find out what works best on our own or after tuning has been finished. Honestly, who knows for now. My bet is that Hardened Spike might be the new go-to choice, since your toolkit now works differently than it did in the past, as you might be able to benefit from that 10-second of buffed damage window better than in BFA, especially with the correct legendary choice and build. Oh yeah, and before I forget, there are currently no changes to PvP talents, so before we move on to legendaries, here's the full list of target capped AoE abilities for the Enhancement Shaman as part of the Shadowlands AoE changes.
Elements guide me.
Keep in mind that you will only be able to equip one legendary effect at a time, but crafting your first one shouldn't take longer than the first reset. Stay tuned for a legendaries and crafting video guide coming in the very near future. Here is the complete list of the legendary effects you will be able to choose from as an Enhancement Shaman. Let's start things off by saying that while your Covenant abilities are in my opinion a bit boring, which you'll see later on, thankfully your legendaries are not, as each of them gives you a reason to play a different build with synergies that go alongside with it. But the one you should be on the lookout for is Legacy of the Frost Witch with the Hailstorm talent, as the combination of those two and Maelstrom stack management make the spec flow just really well in both single target and AoE scenarios. For some PvP goodness, Primal Lava with a Hot Hand Levelash combo combo might do pretty well as a short burst window, as it would make your empowered lava lashes have close to no cooldown with 3 flame shocks out in arenas. My special mention goes out to the general one deeply rooted elements, which could potentially be very strong in dungeons due to the newly added big AoE hit when activating Ascendance. However, as of the latest beta build, this legendary effect is still bugged and Ascendance simply doesn't activate, so I can't tell you for sure. Lastly, there's also the previously mentioned Elemental Equilibrium that is in theory an Elemental Shaman legendary, but also works for enhancement. This one could definitely be very strong with Elemental Blast or even ridiculous in some scenarios with a Knight of a Covenant ability, which you'll see in a bit.
The spirits will guide me.
Conduits make up for another layer of endgame character progression, but since the general idea is that you're going to be able to pick and choose which one you want to use in your selected soulbind, it should come down to your preferred option. What's likely going to happen is that you usually want to take the ones that sim the best, however, don't let that distract you from defensive or utility ones, as they are more often than not extremely powerful for PvP or general utility. As shown on screen, there are 3 categories of conduits. Potency ones are all about ability throughput, with one of the choices being a Covenant ability upgrade, the other 2 are Endurance, which is based around increased survivability, and Finesse, which stands for overall utility or movement increases. Keep in mind the amount of which type and how many conduits you will be able to use is tied to your selected soulbind talent tree, knowing that when it comes to potency conduits, you will be able to have a maximum of 3 of them as a trade-off for less Finesse conduits instead. All I can say is that your potency choices as an Enhancement Shaman are pretty good, but also play well into different builds like the Lava Lash or Hailstorm one, meaning that I hardly see a reason to not go for the 3 potency choices, as your Finesse and Endurance conduits are a bit lackluster in comparison.
Let's get on with it.
Since Blizzard is not going to change their minds about the possibility of changing Covenant abilities, well, at least not before, let's say, in the 9.1 patch, you as a player are going to have to pick one and stick with it. I have created a dreaded tier list that can potentially help you in the decision-making process that revolves purely around the performance in all 3 respective types of endgame content, which are Mythic Plus dungeons, arenas, and more single-target oriented raid encounters. This tier list will have a point system, on a scale of 1 to 4 in the respective content, as there are, well, 4 covenants to choose from and you will have to pair one against the other, resulting in a decision in the end. 1 point means likely the worst choice, while 4 means possibly the best one. And now just a big disclaimer, tuning isn't final and likely won't be, even when the game releases, so please don't murder me in the comments if something happens to change and suddenly Blizzard decides to buff something by 300%, where in the case of Shamans this actually happened this week, so I will surely make an update about it. First off, we have Kieran's Vesper Totem, an instant cast on a 1-minute cooldown. The way it works is that it makes your next 3 damaging abilities pulse out arcane damage to up to 6 enemies, as well as your next 3 healing abilities pulse out an AoE heal to up to 6 allies near the totem. You can also replace it multiple times on a 3-second cooldown until it expires, as it disappears after 30 seconds as long as you still have at least 1 damage or healing pulse left. It's honestly non-intrusive to a gameplay that is usually pretty GCD crammed and has a conduit that helps out its single target damage potential if need be. Since it's pretty versatile, it's definitely a good choice for all types of content, just because there aren't any real downsides to using it outside of not being very effective in single target, hence the conduit upgrade, and its long duration makes it possible to use that healing pulse when your party needs it most. Next up, we have Primordial Wave, the Necrold ability on a 45-second cooldown and on an instant cast that doesn't consume Maelstrom stacks. It's just a small hit that applies Flame Shock on your target or a small heal if used on an ally. The important thing it does is that it makes your next Lightning Bolt hit all targets affected with your Flame Shocks, but there isn't any way at the moment to have any decent scaling with your Lightning Bolts outside of Stormkeeper, especially since it's usually not something you want to spend Maelstrom on in AoE scenarios, as well as requires some setup to make it work. This is a perfect example of a #pull the ripcord ability, as this current version for enhancement simply doesn't work well anywhere in comparison to your other choices. It kinda sucks because if you were to off-spec, for example, it's pretty excellent for the elemental spec. Next up, we have Fate Transfusion, the Nightfare ability on a 2-minute cooldown, and is a 3-second channeled ability that cannot become instant through Maelstrom weapon stacks. The way it works is it deals nature damage to up to 4 targets in the zone every 0.5 seconds of the channel duration, then allows you to release an instant AoE healing wave to up to 4 allies, based on 15% of the damage it did, but also gives you 1 Maelstrom weapon stack if you fully finish the channel, which isn't exactly a lot. The important part is that the damage component is split amongst those 4 enemies. What that means is that after being recently buffed, it deals a real amount of single target damage if fully channeled, but still feels a bit clunky to use. Since you're usually in melee using instant globals, having to channel for 2 to 3 seconds feels a bit out of place. As with all channeled abilities, the channel time will get lowered with haste, but why do I say that? Hear me out. Imagine this in PvP. Because it's considered nature damage, it works with the Earthen Spike talent, the previously mentioned elemental legendary, as well as scales with your mastery. Well yeah, the channel can get interrupted, but if you were to use your PvP Bloodless talent, the full channel is done in about 2 seconds, and with current values, it would just basically one-shot somebody. You can expect to see some enhancement mastery burst cheese even if it gets nerfed, because for as long as those interactions will work, it will still be pretty deadly. For PvE, you'll likely be better off not doing this kind of all-in cheese, as it's probably a DPS loss over the course of a fight, unless playing a mastery-oriented build would actually be viable. Lastly, we have Ventyr's Chain Harvest on a 1.5 minute cooldown with a 2.5 second cast. Since it's a cast, it works with Maelstrom weapon stacks and becomes instant and has its effects buffed by 100% if you were to use them on it, so you definitely should. It sends out a chain wave of animate that deals damage to up to 5 enemies and heals up to 5 allies at the same time, but also has its cooldown reduced by 5 seconds for each target critically struck, so in theory up to a maximum of 50 seconds. Since it gets its effect buffed by stacks, it can also be further increased with more synergy with the conduits such as Focus Lightning, and it's definitely worth it, as with current tuning values, it just does a ridiculous amount of damage and healing in just one global cooldown. It comes with the cost of using 5 Maelstrom stacks for it, but since that actually buffs the ability, it's a good trade-off. It's going to be good absolutely everywhere, unless it gets nerfed, which honestly it should, as they kind of overbuffed it. Now that I've covered them all, you can have a quick look at the total points gathered by all choices, but again, do not take this as something set in stone, as nothing is final and everything have been ranked given current numerical values. Blizzard promised they will try to balance Covenant choices in a way that no choice is going to be the best one for everything. And while they went a bit overboard with Ventyr, I can say that they're at least trying, as most of those Shaman abilities were pretty useless those last couple of months. Hopefully, they'll have a solid look at the Necrold ability for the enhancement spec, as it really could use more love. Additionally, this list doesn't cover soulbinds and their combinations, as they are frankly impossible to cover due to the possibilities being almost endless. Be on the lookout for my pinned comment before release with the new ranking if things get changed again.
Let's groove tonight.
Overall, while you may hear out there that enhancement's damage is a bit on the lower end at the moment, keep in mind that no real tuning passes were made, as well as data was taken before the recently buffed Covenant abilities. What should be important is that the spec rework treatment they received is pretty wonderful in my opinion. I can only wish more specs got that kind of love from the devs, as it was long overdue after failing to fulfill BFA's promise, so I'm happy for all my enhancement brothers and sisters out there. The single target and mostly uncapped AoE rotation feels smooth, there are different build possibilities, interesting party conduits and cool legendaries on top of having the raid spot back due to the Windfury totem. The tools are here to make enhancement a very competitive melee spec. The only downside would be that they still lack a stronger form of defensive cooldown, in that their Covenant abilities, even though after the latest tuning pass feel very strong, are not particularly interesting in my opinion, because they all feel like it's just press X ability to do damage and healing, but at least now you can think of something creative with your Legendaries, Conduits and talents. I do realize that this video became a bit long, but that's only because there was so much to cover. As an additional selling point, let me add that Legion artifacts have had their Transmog restrictions lifted, meaning that you can have, for example, a double fire hammer version of your Doomhammer. If you ever wish to support me in my endless pursuit of not starving by means other than liking and sharing my stuff with your friends, I allowed myself to create a Patreon page with different perks and guides for your future Shadowlands adventures, so that I might feel like I've earned your support by giving something back, which would allow me to continue making videos with quality similar to this one. You can also visit me on my Twitch channel, as this lockdown period can get really lonely at times and it's always cooler with more folks around. Who knows, maybe then I won't sound as depressed. Shown on screen were different Transmog sets you'll be able to get in Shadowlands as a shaman, courtesy of Lace TV. Happy birthday to your daughter, by the way. Lastly, I would like to thank the OiOi gaming community for their help in making this video. They are creating a place where gamers of all kinds can get together and enjoy all things gaming. If you want to find out more, you can find the links to their socials in the description below. Goodbye.